All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're looking at a poll that pretty much turns a common political narrative completely on its head. The whole idea suggests that for a big chunk of voters, the problem isn't that politicians are too extreme, it's that they're not nearly extreme enough. So, let's dig into the data and see what's really going on.
I mean, it's pretty obvious the political landscape feels fundamentally different these days, right? The source material we're diving into argues that we're in this unique, almost existential moment where all the old playbooks, well, they just don't apply anymore.
So this massive shift begs the most important question of all, the one that gets debated endlessly on cable news and in think pieces. In this brand new era, what do voters actually want from the people in charge?
Okay, let's start with a very familiar idea. One our source material calls the too much narrative.
You've definitely heard this one before, haven't you? It's that common piece of political commentary. The idea that a candidate like Donald Trump, with his promises of things like retribution, might just be pushing the envelope a little too far, maybe even alienating the exact voters he needs to win.
But what happens when you stop guessing and you just ask voters directly? Well, this is where our source, a poll from Rasmussen Reports, serves up a really surprising and honestly a powerful contradiction to that whole narrative.
The poll just cut right through all the noise and asked likely voters this very direct question. No ambiguity, just straight to the point. So, what did they find out?
And the results are, well, they're pretty fascinating. According to the poll, only 21%, that's about 1 out of every 5 likely voters, believe he has done too much, which, makes you wonder, where does that leave everyone else?
Well, here's the other side of that coin, and this is where that common narrative we talked about really starts to crumble. A much, much larger group, 38% of likely voters, believes he has not done enough.
And when you put those two numbers side by side, 21% versus 38%, the source argues that the real story here isn't about voters wanting moderation. Nope, it suggests they're demanding something else entirely.
Now, this trend gets even more interesting when we zoom in on one specific group, younger voters.
The source uses this really stark phrase to describe the mindset of voters under 30, a generation they say is totally over traditional ideology. Instead, they're looking for something the source calls brutal order. What does that mean? Basically, a demand for leaders who will just get things done, decisively, even if it means breaking a few norms along the way.
And the data backs this up in a huge way. Just look at this chart. While 38% of the general population says Trump hasn't done enough, that number just skyrockets to 49%. We're talking nearly half among voters under 30. That's a massive difference.
So what is going on here? According to the analysis, this group is just completely fed up with what they call performative politics. A staggering 3/4 of them believe most officials are just in it for themselves, using their positions for personal gain. And here's the real eye-opener. The source argues they are the demographic most likely to agree with the pretty controversial idea of a leader violating laws to save the country. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. What's driving this desire for such drastic action? The source points its finger directly at a deep, profound crisis of trust in our federal institutions.
And the language used in the source material is incredibly strong. I mean, at one point it describes the federal government as a rotted corpse, just to emphasize the level of decay they feel exists.
The analysis actually points to several key events that it says have fueled this feeling. And just to be clear, these are the specific reasons given in the source. A perception of a weaponized Department of Justice, what it very controversially calls the January 6th psychological operation, the backlash to COVID-era mandates, and the view that the FBI is acting like a personal Gestapo.
And you can see this sentiment reflected crystal clear in the data. When this particular voter base was asked if agencies like the FBI and the CIA need major reform, an absolutely overwhelming 83% said yes. In their view, the job is nowhere near finished.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What's the ultimate takeaway from this poll? What are these voters really, truly demanding from their leaders?
Now, when the source talks about brutal government reform, it's really important to understand that they don't just mean political payback or settling scores. No, it's defined as a demand for a fundamental, super aggressive overhaul of a system that they see as completely broken and basically captured by special interests.
And this, right here, is the central argument of the whole analysis. For this significant chunk of the electorate, the demand is not for moderation. It's for a leader who is willing to take on these deep, systemic problems head-on, even if it means breaking some of the established rules to get the job done.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty provocative question that just sort of emerges from all this data.
As trust in institutions keeps falling, is the idea of violating laws to save the country moving from the fringe right into the mainstream? Something to think about as the political landscape keeps on changing.